He hasn't eaten in 7 days. The words hung in the sterile air of the Camp Lejeune K-9 recovery wing, barely more than a whisper, but enough to make Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks freeze in place. Ghost, a pristine white German shepherd, lay curled into a corner of the steel-enclosed kennel, eyes half closed, ears flicking occasionally, nostrils quivering as if he could smell every footstep in the hall, every breath from the medical staff moving quietly around him. 7 days. 7 empty bowls, 7 meals untouched. The scent of kibble, of raw meat, of the mild antiseptic from the floor below, all mingled into a perfume he refused to acknowledge. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, almost like the rhythm of a heart, steady yet hollow. Isaiah knelt a few feet from the kennel, hands resting lightly on his knees, boots scraping softly against the polished concrete, listening to the subtle sound of Ghost's breathing. He had been through the chaos of war, had felt the sting of shrapnel and the silence after an IED explosion, but nothing in the field had prepared him for this quiet, stubborn sorrow that clung to a creature so full of life, yet so intent on shutting it all away. The sun had risen hours ago outside the high windows, sending thin shafts of light that slanted across the room, catching the dust in tiny golden columns, illuminating Ghost's white coat like a soft halo, yet the brightness could not coax him from his despondence. Isaiah had read the charts. He had spoken with the veterinary staff. He had tried the soft tones, the encouragement, the careful hands reaching through the bars, but nothing moved Ghost. Not a tilt of the head, not a wag of the tail, nothing beyond the occasional flick of an ear and a faint sigh that seemed to carry the weight of a memory he refused to release. Isaiah's dark eyes, sharp beneath the brim of his cap, never left the dog. He remembered the names, the calls, the way the dog used to respond to him in training years ago. But now, Ghost did not respond to names, did not respond to commands, did not respond to the world around him. He had built an invisible wall around himself, as if the world had taken everything and he had nothing left to give. Isaiah could feel the tension coil in his shoulders, in the quiet lines of his face, the weight of grief he carried from the loss of his team overseas mirrored in the stillness of the dog before him. The air was cool but not cold, carrying a faint scent of pine from outside, filtered through the open vents, mixing with the warm, metallic smell of the kennel's fixtures, a reminder of the contrast between the natural world and the sterile reality they now inhabited. He shifted slightly, careful not to startle Ghost, and allowed his gaze to soften, watching the dog's chest rise and fall in a slow, labored rhythm. There was a time when Ghost would have bounded to him at the sight of his uniform, when a single whistle could summon obedience and joy in equal measure. Now, the uniform hung loosely on Isaiah's frame, worn and creased, a quiet echo of a life that demanded vigilance, but offered no easy answers. The dog's eyes opened wider, amber catching the light, reflecting a history neither man dared speak aloud. Isaiah leaned closer, lowering his voice, whispering gently, not a command, not a plea, but a quiet recognition of the weight carried on 4 legs. The name Daniel Mercer passed unspoken between them, a bridge to a past neither had fully released, a secret held in memory, in muscle, in bone. Ghost twitched, ears flicking forward, a soft inhale, a sign so subtle it might have been missed by anyone else. 7 days of refusing life, 7 days of silence, and in that tiny twitch, Isaiah saw the first trace of acknowledgement. The room seemed to hold its breath with them, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, the distant murmur of other kennels fading into insignificance. Isaiah remained still, silent, a sentinel beside a sentinel, knowing that in that quiet acknowledgement, the threads of trust, of loyalty, of memory had begun to stir. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the briny scent of the Atlantic through the open windows, brushing against the fur of Ghost's white coat, ruffling it ever so slightly, as if nature itself was urging the dog to remember, to recognize, to hope again. Isaiah's fingers hovered near the cold metal bars, ready to reach, but holding back, letting the moment breathe, letting Ghost take the first step on his own terms. The kennel felt impossibly large, yet in the stillness, in the 7 days of refusal, the bond between man and dog was stretching across it, unseen but palpable, a quiet promise that had survived the storm, survived the loss, and waited patiently for the right whisper to break the spell. And Isaiah whispered again, softer this time, letting the name hang like a fragile key in the air, and Ghost's head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring, eyes narrowing with focused recognition, the first hint of life returning to the body that had turned away from sustenance, the spirit that had closed itself off from the world beginning to stir, just enough to make Isaiah's heart catch, to make him understand that patience, presence, and the memory of a name held the power to coax even the most silent soul back from the edge. Isaiah Brooks had not come to Camp Lejeune looking for another soul to save. He had come because the orders said temporary assignment, rehabilitation support, canine recovery wing, 3 weeks minimum, and Marines did not argue with orders just because their own hearts were tired. He was 38 years old, tall, broad through the shoulders, with dark brown skin weathered by sun, salt air, and years under a helmet. A faint scar curved beneath his left jaw where the surgeons had done their careful work, and when he walked, there was a slight hesitation in his right leg, not enough to slow him, just enough to remind him that the body remembers what the mouth refuses to say. That morning, after Ghost's head had lifted for the first time, Isaiah stayed by the kennel long after the veterinarian told him he could step out for coffee. He did not move. He sat on the clean concrete floor with his back against the opposite wall, close enough for Ghost to see him, far enough not to ask too much. The recovery wing breathed around them in quiet mechanical rhythms. Air vents sighed above the kennels. A washer turned somewhere in the back room, rolling blankets through warm water and detergent. From outside came the muffled cadence of boots crossing pavement, young Marines calling to one another, trucks moving across the base road, life continuing with that strange confidence life always had, even when one room seemed frozen in grief. Isaiah watched Ghost lower his head again, not defeated exactly, but guarded, as if that small response had cost him more strength than a mile-long run in July heat. The bowl still sat untouched near the kennel door. Chicken, rice, a little broth, warmed just enough to carry scent through the room. Ghost's nose twitched once, then went still. Dr. Emily Hart stood nearby with a clipboard pressed against her chest, her face drawn with the quiet strain of someone who had tried science, kindness, patience, and prayer, and still did not know which one might work. She was in her early 40s, with auburn hair tied back, tired blue eyes, and the steady hands of a person who had spent years earning the trust of animals who could not explain where they hurt. She glanced at Isaiah, then at the dog. "He responded to you," she said softly. Isaiah kept his eyes on Ghost. He responded to something. Dr. Hart stepped closer, careful to keep her voice low. Most handlers push too fast. They want progress they can measure. A bite of food, a step forward, a tail wag. You did not push. Isaiah looked down at his hands. His palms were rough, marked by old calluses and small pale lines from work, training, and time. "Pushing is not always leadership," he said. The words surprised him a little. They sounded like something another man had told him once, before everything changed. A man named Caleb Warren, his closest friend, the kind of friend who could make terrible coffee taste decent by laughing at it first. Caleb had been the one who believed Isaiah could lead men without becoming stone. 7 years later, Isaiah still carried Caleb's dog tag against his chest, tucked beneath his shirt where no one could see it. He had worn it through hospitals, through physical therapy, through nights when sleep came in broken pieces and left before dawn. He had told everyone he was fine because that was the easiest lie a Marine could offer. But sitting across from Ghost, watching that white dog refuse the world one bowl at a time, Isaiah felt the lie becoming harder to hold. Ghost was not the only one who had stopped taking in what kept him alive. Isaiah still ate. He still worked. He still answered when spoken to. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped receiving joy, stopped allowing comfort to settle, stopped believing that anything lost could return in a different form. The dog did not know that. Or maybe, in some quiet animal way, he did. Ghost shifted slightly, one paw sliding forward, claws tapping once against the floor. His white coat looked clean now, but there were places along his shoulders where the fur had grown uneven, thin patches from old stress, old harness where old seasons no report could fully describe. Around his neck was a plain recovery collar with his current name printed in black letters. Ghost. Isaiah stared at that name, and felt something tighten in his chest. A ghost was something left behind after life had moved on. It was not a name for a living creature. It was a wound pretending to be an identity. Who named him that? Isaiah asked. Dr. Hart followed his gaze. The intake team. His prior records were incomplete. He came in under a service number. No reliable call name listed. Someone said he moved silently and looked like smoke in the yard. So they called him Ghost. Isaiah nodded, but the answer did not sit right. Ghost's ear turned toward him again, a small white triangle catching the light. Not at the sound of the name. At the sound of Isaiah's breathing, maybe. At the shape of a memory moving nearby. Isaiah leaned his head back against the wall and let the silence stretch. He did not know the dog yet, not truly, but he knew what it felt like to be renamed by pain. Survivor, patient, veteran, asset, case number. Words people used when they did not know what else to do with someone still breathing after the life they understood had ended. Outside, the wind pushed against the building, carrying the smell of cut grass, diesel, and distant ocean water. Ghost opened his eyes again, watching Isaiah through the bars. Isaiah did not smile. He did not reach. He simply stayed. And for the first time since he had arrived at Camp Lejeune, Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks understood that his assignment was not to fix the dog. It was to sit close enough for the truth to come out on its own. By late afternoon, the recovery wing had settled into the slow rhythm of a place waiting for something it could not force. The sun outside Camp Lejeune had dropped behind a line of pine trees, washing the high windows in pale amber, and the long hallway smelled of warm laundry, clean metal, and the faint salt of the Carolina air that drifted in whenever the back door opened. Isaiah remained near Ghost's kennel, not always speaking, not always looking directly at him, because some wounded creatures needed company that did not feel like a demand. Dr. Hart had left him a folding chair, but he kept returning to the floor, back against the wall, one knee bent, his hands loose and visible. Ghost watched him in fragments. An eye half opened, an ear shifting, a slow blink. Nothing anyone could write as progress on a medical chart, yet Isaiah felt it in the room, a thin thread tightening between them. Around 4 o'clock, the base outside began its evening movement. Trucks rolled past the building with a low growl. A whistle blew from a training field beyond the fence. Somewhere in the distance, a drill instructor called cadence, the voices of young Marines answering in unison, rising and falling like waves against shore. Ghost did not move for any of it. Then the bugle sounded from across the base, faint through the walls, clear enough to slip beneath the door and touch every corner of the recovery wing. The notes were simple, familiar, tired with honor. Ghost's body changed before Isaiah could name what he saw. The dog's paws tightened against the blanket. His breathing caught. His white ears lifted, not fully, but with the sudden tension of a memory standing upright inside him. Isaiah leaned forward without meaning to. Dr. Hart, who had just stepped back into the hallway with a fresh water bowl, stopped where she was. Neither of them spoke. The bugle continued, floating over the base with that solemn sound that made even busy men slow down, made flags seem heavier, made the air remember every name spoken and unspoken beneath it. Ghost's eyes opened wide, amber bright in the slanting light. For one fragile second, he did not look like a dog refusing food. He looked like a sentry waiting for a command from someone beyond the room. Then the last note faded, and Ghost lowered his head to the blanket, his muzzle pressed flat, his chest trembling once before going still again. Isaiah felt his throat tighten. He had seen Marines respond to old sounds that way. A dropped tray in a cafeteria, a car backfiring on a summer street, a song on a radio that had played in a different country under a different sky. The body kept a list the mind tried to burn. He did that yesterday, Dr. Hart whispered. And the day before. Same time. Every time the bugle carries from the parade deck. Isaiah turned slowly toward her. Why did nobody mention it? She looked at the bowl in her hands, then back at Ghost. Because he still would not eat. We were focused on keeping him stable. Isaiah nodded, but his eyes stayed on the dog. He is not ignoring the world. Dr. Hart stepped closer. No, Isaiah's voice dropped. He is listening for the wrong part of it. The words fell quietly, but they changed the air. After that, Isaiah began to test the edges of Ghost's silence, not with pressure, but with patience. He asked a young corporal passing the hallway to hum the cadence Ghost had ignored earlier. Nothing. He tapped a food scoop gently against the stainless steel counter. Nothing. He opened the storage cabinet where old leashes and harnesses hung in neat rows, letting the leather scent drift out. Ghost's nose moved once, then stilled. Isaiah brought no conclusion too quickly. He had learned long ago that grief could wear the mask of stubbornness, fear, anger, even discipline. You had to watch longer than your own comfort allowed. The next morning, mist clung to the grass outside the building, and the recovery wing glowed with soft gray light. A private named Lewis came in to deliver clean towels, young enough that his uniform still looked borrowed from a future he had not grown into. He was cheerful in that careful way people became around sadness, trying not to make noise, but somehow making more of it. As he crossed the room, he whistled 3 notes under his breath, a quick little tune, careless and unfinished. Ghost rose so fast his paws slipped beneath him. The sound was not loud, but the movement cracked through the room like a bell. Isaiah stood. Dr. Hart turned from the sink. Private Lewis froze with the towels against his chest, eyes wide. Ghost had managed only halfway up before his weakened legs trembled. He stared at the private, ears forward, nose working hard, every line of his body reaching toward that small sound. Then, just as suddenly, his strength failed. He sank back onto the blanket, but he did not turn away. Isaiah crossed the room slowly, stopping beside the private. "Do it again," he said softly. The young Marine swallowed. "Sir." The whistle. "Same way." Private Lewis looked uncertain, then blew the 3 notes again, softer this time. Ghost's eyes sharpened. His tail did not wag. His body did not relax. But his gaze locked onto the sound as if a door had opened somewhere far away and a familiar shape had almost stepped through. Isaiah felt the hair rise along the back of his neck. This was not appetite. This was not training. This was recognition without arrival, a road leading to a house that was no longer standing. He turned to Dr. Hart. "Find everything that came in with him. Every collar, every strap, every tag, every piece of paper. If it looks useless, I want to see it." Dr. Hart did not ask why. Something in Isaiah's voice had changed, not louder, not sharper, but anchored. She left quickly, her shoes tapping down the hall. Isaiah lowered himself near the kennel again, close enough for Ghost to see him beside the young private. He nodded once toward Lewis. "That tune. Where did you learn it?" Lewis frowned, thinking. "I do not know, Staff Sergeant. My uncle used to whistle it. He served years back. Said a handler in his unit used it to call his dog from the training yard." Isaiah looked at Ghost. The dog was still watching, still breathing hard, still refusing the bowl beside him. But now the silence had a shape. Somewhere behind the wrong name, behind the untouched food, behind 7 days of fading strength, there was a sound Ghost had been waiting for. And Isaiah understood that before this dog could eat, someone had to find the memory he was starving for. Dr. Hart returned 12 minutes later carrying a clear plastic evidence bin against her hip, and the moment Isaiah saw the way her fingers gripped the rim, he knew she had found something that did not belong in a routine intake file. The bin was marked with Ghost's service number in black permanent marker, the numbers slightly smeared from old handling, and inside lay the remains of a life reduced to objects. A faded leash stiff with age, a nylon harness with one buckle replaced by a mismatched brass clip, 2 folded medical forms, a small square of worn canvas, and a sealed brown envelope with no return address. Isaiah did not reach for it immediately. He glanced toward Ghost first. The white German shepherd had gone still again, but not the same kind of stillness as before. This was a tension hidden inside exhaustion. His eyes were open. His nose was lifted half an inch from the blanket. Dr. Hart set the bin on the low examination table beside the kennel and spoke softly, as if the objects themselves might bruise. This was all stored with his transport papers. Most of it was not catalogued beyond personal equipment. Isaiah stood slowly. His right leg ached from sitting too long on the concrete, but he ignored it. Pain had its place. It could wait. He picked up the harness first, letting it hang from his hands. The fabric was sun-faded from dark olive to something almost gray, and the Velcro patch where a name should have been was blank, pulled clean years ago. Ghost's nostrils moved. Not much. Enough. Isaiah held the harness lower, not pushing it through the bars, only letting the scent settle in the air between them. Leather, dust, detergent, sun, old fields, long rides in military vehicles, the ghost of hands that had buckled it 1,000 times. Ghost's breathing changed. Dr. Hart noticed, too. Her mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. Isaiah laid the harness down and unfolded the canvas square. It was not official gear, not by regulation. It looked like a piece cut from an old field jacket, soft at the edges, its stitching uneven. On one corner, 3 letters had been written in fading black ink, almost lost in the fabric grain. H-A-L. Isaiah stared at them. The room seemed to narrow around those letters. He did not say them aloud. Not yet. Ghost shifted one paw forward, claws scraping softly against the kennel floor. Isaiah felt the quiet pull of that movement, the way a fisherman feels a line tighten under dark water. Dr. Hart checked the forms next, smoothing them across the table. Transfer record. Recovery notes. His file was rebuilt after arrival stateside. No full handler history attached. Isaiah looked over her shoulder. Most of the pages were standard, clinical, stripped of all feeling. Weight. Condition. Service number. Intake date. Temporary call name. Behavioral notes. Refuses food when isolated. Becomes alert to bugle notes. Possible handler attachment trauma. Isaiah's eyes stopped on a line near the bottom, half obscured by a photocopy shadow. Prior item recovered with K9, 1 damaged identification tag. Where is it? He asked. Dr. Hart lifted the sealed envelope. Here. Isaiah took it carefully. The paper crackled under his thumb. It had been opened before and taped shut again, the adhesive yellowed. He peeled it back with the patience of someone handling a letter from the dead. Inside was a single dog tag, not the polished kind issued new, but an old one dulled by years of wear. The chain was gone. One edge was bent slightly, as if it had been pressed hard against something solid, and the stamped letters were scratched, but readable beneath the light. Daniel M. Mercer, United States Marine Corps. Isaiah's chest tightened, not because the name was familiar, but because Ghost's reaction was immediate. The dog lifted his head fully for the first time that day, his amber eyes fixed on Isaiah's hand. Not on the food, not on Dr. Hart, on the tag. The room became very quiet. Even the washer in the back seemed to finish its cycle and fall silent at the same moment. Isaiah held the tag flat on his palm, low enough for Ghost to see through the bars. Daniel Mercer, he said, barely above a breath. Ghost's ears rose. His body trembled once, a small wave passing from shoulder to flank, then fading. Dr. Hart whispered, "That is the strongest response we have seen." Isaiah did not answer. He was looking at the bent edge of the tag, at the way it rested in his dark palm like a fragment of a promise. Some names were written in ink. Some were carved into metal. Some lived in a dog's memory long after every file had failed them. Ghost made a sound then. Not a bark. Not a whine. A low, broken breath that seemed to come from somewhere older than hunger. Isaiah closed his fingers gently around the tag, then opened them again, letting the metal catch the pale afternoon light. On instinct, his other hand moved to his own chest, where Caleb Warren's dog tag rested under his shirt. 2 men, 2 names, 2 losses, 1 living room of silence between them. He understood something then that no report had stated. Ghost was not refusing food because he did not recognize kindness. He was refusing a world that had stopped speaking the name of the one he loved. Dr. Hart turned back to the bin and lifted the last object, the small canvas scrap with the letters H-A-L. Her brow furrowed. Maybe part of a word, she said. Isaiah looked from the cloth to the dog tag, then to Ghost, whose eyes had not left his hand. The old whistle, the bugle, the missing handler, the wrong name on the collar, the bowl untouched for days. Pieces of a prayer scattered across a table. Isaiah crouched near the kennel door, close enough that Ghost could smell the metal now, close enough that the dog's nose pressed faintly toward the bars. "I am going to find out who he was," Isaiah said softly. He did not know whether he was speaking to Ghost, to Dr. Hart, to Daniel Mercer, or to the part of himself that had been sitting in silence for 7 years. Ghost blinked once, slow and deliberate. Then, with strength that seemed borrowed from the memory itself, he stretched his neck forward until the tip of his nose touched the air nearest the tag. Isaiah stayed perfectly still. That was all Ghost could give, but it was enough to change the mission. That evening, Isaiah carried Daniel Mercer's dog tag into the records office at the far end of the recovery wing, where the lights were softer and the air smelled faintly of paper, old coffee, and rain blowing in from the coast. Outside the window, Camp Lejeune had turned silver under a low Carolina sky, the kind of sky that made every building look like it was holding its breath. Dr. Hart stayed with Ghost while Isaiah worked, promising to call if the dog changed, though neither of them needed to say what kind of change they feared. The office belonged to Master Sergeant Ruth Collins, a woman in her late 50s with close-cropped gray hair, steady brown eyes, and a voice that could make a room straighten without her raising it. She had served long enough to know that paperwork was never just paperwork. Behind every missing form was a person. Behind every person was someone still waiting for the truth to come home. When Isaiah placed the bent tag on her desk, Collins looked at it for a long moment. She did not touch it right away. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "In the K9 intake bin," Isaiah said. "It came in with Ghost." Collins finally picked it up, turning it beneath the desk lamp. The metal caught the light in small, tired flashes. "Daniel Mercer," she read, and something in her expression shifted, not surprise exactly, but recognition buried under years of discipline. Isaiah noticed. Marines notice small changes. "You know the name?" Collins leaned back in her chair. For a moment, the only sound was the rain tapping against the glass and the faint hum of the printer on the side table. "I knew of him," she said. "Corporal Daniel Mercer. K9 handler. Quiet kid from Ohio. Good with dogs. Better with people than he realized." Isaiah sat across from her, the chair creaking under his weight. His leg throbbed beneath the table, but his mind was sharp now, focused. His name is not in Ghost's active handler record. Collins's jaw tightened. A lot of things did not make it into that record. She turned to her computer, typed with deliberate slowness, and began pulling from archived personnel notes that had not been opened in years. The screen glow painted her face pale blue. Isaiah waited. He had learned long ago that the truth did not always come when summoned. Sometimes it arrived limping, wrapped in black ink and missing pages. Collins found the first file after several minutes. A unit roster, a training certificate, a photograph scanned poorly into the system. She turned the monitor toward Isaiah. There, on the screen, stood a young Marine with sandy blonde hair, a crooked smile, and one hand resting on the neck of a white German shepherd who looked younger, stronger, brighter than the dog now lying in the recovery wing. The Marine's name beneath the image read Daniel M. Mercer. The dog's name did not read Ghost. Isaiah leaned closer. The label was blurred at the edge, but the letters were clear enough. Halo. He felt the air leave his chest slowly. Not all at once. Like a door opening in a house that had been locked for years. "Halo," he whispered. The name felt different. Warmer. Alive. Collins looked at him. That was the call name Mercer gave him. Said the dog came into the world looking like a piece of light that had learned how to run. Isaiah stared at the photograph. Halo sat straight beside Daniel, ears tall, eyes fixed upward, not at the camera but at the man. That look was unmistakable. Devotion without question. Trust without condition. The kind of loyalty no training manual could manufacture. Collins opened another file, and her face grew still. "There was a field incident," she said carefully. "Not the kind people like talking about. Confusion in the reports. Bad weather. Bad communications. Mercer was listed as separated from his team for a period of time." Isaiah's eyes narrowed. "Separated sounds like blame." "It became blame," Collins said. "For a while." The rain thickened against the window. Isaiah heard it like static. Collins continued, choosing every word with care. "The early report suggested he failed to return at the ordered time. Later statements challenged that. 2 witnesses said Mercer stayed behind because Halo was injured and disoriented. He refused to abandon the dog until recovery support arrived." Isaiah looked down at the dog tag on the desk. The bent edge. The scratches. The stubborn survival of a name. Was the record corrected? Collins did not answer quickly enough. "That was answer enough." "Partially," she said at last. "Too late for most people to notice." His family received clarification, but the K9 file had already been transferred through 3 departments. Somewhere along the way, Halo became a service number, then a temporary call name, then Ghost. Isaiah closed his eyes for 1 second. He saw the white dog in the kennel, 7 bowls untouched, listening to bugles and old whistles, waiting for the world to remember what he had never forgotten. He was not starving because he wanted to leave, Isaiah said. He was grieving a name everyone took from him. Collins folded her hands on the desk. Her voice softened. "Animals remember differently than we do. Sometimes better. Isaiah reached beneath his collar and pulled out Caleb Warren's dog tag, letting it rest in his palm beside Daniel's. The two pieces of metal did not match, but the sound they made when they touched was small and clear. For 7 years, Isaiah had carried Caleb like an apology. Not a memory. An apology. He had told himself that survival was a duty, but somewhere inside, he had mistaken living for betrayal. Now a dog named Halo was showing him the shape of that mistake. You could carry the dead without lying down beside them. You could remember a name and still answer when morning called. Collins printed the photograph and slid it across the desk. "Take this to him," she said. Isaiah stood, Daniel's tag in one hand, the photograph in the other. His voice was low. "I need the original audio from the training file. Anything with Mercer speaking." Collins nodded once. "I will look." Isaiah turned toward the door. Down the hallway, beyond the records office and the laundry room and the quiet kennels, Ghost was still waiting under the wrong name. But Isaiah no longer walked like a man assigned to sit with a fading dog. He walked like a Marine carrying a message across the last mile. And for the first time that day, he knew exactly what had to be returned before food, before strength, before healing. The name. By the time Isaiah returned to the recovery wing, night had settled over camp. Lejeune, like a dark blue blanket, pulled tight across the roofs, the pine trees, and the quiet roads where military vehicles moved with dimmed headlights. The building had grown still in the way medical places do after hours, not silent, but softened. Machines hummed behind closed doors. A faucet ticked somewhere near the wash station. From the far kennels came the occasional shift of paws against blankets, then stillness again. Dr. Hart stood outside Ghost's kennel with her arms folded, her face calm but tired beneath the fluorescent light. The bowl near the kennel door remained untouched. The broth had cooled. The rice had gone dry at the edges. Ghost lay on his side, his white fur almost glowing against the gray blanket, his breathing steady but shallow. Isaiah stopped a few feet away, Daniel Mercer's dog tag closed inside his fist, the printed photograph tucked beneath his arm. For a moment, he did not enter the room fully. He watched the dog and felt something inside him loosen painfully, like an old knot finally realizing it had been tied for too long. Dr. Hart looked at him. "He lifted his head once after you left," she said. Then he settled again. Isaiah nodded. "I found his name." Her eyes moved to the photograph. "His real name." "Halo." Dr. Hart looked through the kennel bars at the dog with a tenderness that made her seem older and younger at the same time. "Halo," she repeated quietly, not loud enough to reach him, just enough to let the truth exist in the room. Isaiah stepped closer and placed the photograph face down on the table for now. Not yet. He did not want to turn memory into a tool. Not with a creature this fragile. He crouched slowly, his knees protesting, his injured legs stiff from the walk back. The ache rose up his thigh and settled in his hip, but he welcomed it. Pain told him he was still there, still breathing, still capable of staying. Ghost's eyes opened halfway. Isaiah did not say the name. Instead, he sat on the floor outside the kennel, back against the wall, just as he had before. In his closed fist, Daniel's tag warmed against his palm. Beneath his shirt, Caleb Warren's tag rested over his heart. 2 names. 2 waits. 2 promises unfinished. Dr. Hart watched him for a moment, then moved quietly to the desk, giving them room. Isaiah lowered his head and let the memories come, not as a flood, but as small pieces. Caleb laughing over bitter coffee in a paper cup. Caleb tossing him a spare pair of socks before a long patrol because Isaiah had forgotten his. Caleb saying, "You cannot carry everybody, Brooks. Some days you just carry the next step." Isaiah had hated that line after Caleb was gone. It sounded too simple, almost cruel, as if grief could be marched through one step at a time. But now, sitting across from a starving white dog who had held on to a dead man's name with more faith than most people held on to prayer, Isaiah understood the mercy in it. The next step did not erase the last one. It honored it by continuing. He opened his fist. Daniel Mercer's dog tag caught the light. The metal was dull, bent, scarred by time, but the name remained readable. Isaiah touched it with his thumb. Then he reached beneath his collar and pulled Caleb's tag free. The 2 tags lay together in his palm. When they touched, they made a soft click. Ghost's ear moved. Isaiah froze. He waited. The dog's nose twitched. Another faint click came as the tags shifted against each other. Ghost opened his eyes wider. Not with fear, with focus. Isaiah looked at the two pieces of metal and felt the room change around him. The sound was small, almost nothing, but memory lived in almost nothing. A bootstep at the right pace. A whistle in the right key. A tag tapping against a chest during a run. He let the tags touch again, once, gently. Ghost lifted his head an inch from the blanket. Dr. Hart turned from the desk, but did not speak. Isaiah's breath caught. He had spent 7 years avoiding the sound of Caleb's tag when it swung loose, tucking it away under fabric, keeping it quiet, as if silence could make loss safer. Now that same sound was calling a dog back toward life. Isaiah looked down, and for the first time in years, he did not feel shame for surviving. He felt responsibility. Not the heavy kind that crushes a man into the ground, but the sacred kind that asks him to. Stand. I know, he whispered, though he was not sure whether he was speaking to Ghost or to himself. I know what it means to keep listening for someone. Ghost's front paw stretched forward. It was a small movement, weak and slow, but it crossed a line nothing else had crossed. Isaiah stayed still, tears gathering before he could stop them. He did not wipe them away. Marines learned discipline, but some moments were not meant to be controlled. Some were meant to be received. The hallway beyond them remained quiet. Outside, wind brushed along the side of the building, carrying the smell of wet pine and ocean salt. Isaiah looked at the untouched bowl, then back at Ghost. He understood now that food could not be offered like a solution. Food was life, and life felt like betrayal when the name you loved had been buried under the wrong one. He took the photograph from the table and turned it over in his lap, not showing it yet, only looking at it himself. Daniel Mercer smiled from the faded image, one hand resting on the neck of the young white dog called Halo. The dog in the picture looked upward with complete trust. The dog in the kennel looked toward Isaiah with exhausted suspicion and a hope so thin it was almost invisible. Isaiah placed Daniel's tag beside Caleb's on the floor between them, just outside the bars. You did not forget him, he said softly. And that means he has not gone the way they thought. Ghost's breathing trembled. His eyes stayed on the tags. Isaiah leaned back against the wall, shoulders heavy, heart strangely lighter. For 7 days, Ghost had refused to eat. For 7 years, Isaiah had refused to let any part of himself heal beyond what duty required. In that quiet room, beneath the pale lights, man and dog faced the same truth from opposite sides of the bars. Neither of them had stopped loving the ones they lost. They had only forgotten that love was supposed to keep them alive, not hold them still. Master Sergeant Ruth Collins found the training file at 9:17 that night, buried inside an archived folder so old the computer seemed reluctant to open it. The message came to Dr. Hart's desk with a quiet chime, and for a moment no one moved. Isaiah was still on the floor outside Ghost's kennel, the two dog tags resting between them like small pieces of moonlight. Ghost had not eaten. He had not stood, but his eyes had remained open for nearly 20 minutes, fixed on the metal, fixed on Isaiah, fixed on something just beyond the reach of the room. Dr. Hart rolled the chair closer to the desk and opened the file with careful hands. The screen brightened. A video appeared, grainy and washed with the pale color of an older camera, showing a training yard under a wide American sky. The grass was cut short. Orange cones marked a path. In the background, Marines stood with arms folded, watching a young white German shepherd move through a basic search drill with quick, joyful precision. Isaiah rose slowly. His leg was stiff, but he barely felt it. He stepped behind Dr. Hart and stared at the screen. There he was. Younger, stronger, bright as first snow in morning sun. Halo, not Ghost. Halo moved like he believed the world was built for running. His ears stood tall. His tail carried a natural confidence. He circled a cone, found a hidden pouch beneath a wooden crate, and sat proudly, looking off camera as if waiting for the only approval that mattered. Then a voice came through the tiny computer speakers, warm, young, and full of quiet laughter. Good boy, Halo. Come here. Ghost's body changed before the words finished. His head lifted from the blanket. His ears rose, trembling. Dr. Hart covered her mouth with one hand. Isaiah did not speak. The voice continued from the old recording, easy and familiar, the kind of voice that did not command love because it already had it. That is my boy. Come on, Halo. On the screen, Daniel Mercer stepped into frame, younger than Isaiah had imagined. with sandy blonde hair under a training cap and a smile that looked like it had survived long days by choosing kindness anyway. He knelt, and the young dog bounded into him, pressing his white head against Daniel's chest. Daniel laughed softly and rubbed both hands along the dog's neck. "You hear me, Halo? Always come when I call." The room seemed to tilt under the weight of that sentence. Ghost pushed one front paw beneath himself. His legs shook. Isaiah turned from the screen and crouched near the kennel door. "Easy," he whispered, not to stop him, only to steady the moment. The video played on. Daniel's voice came again, lower this time, speaking to someone off camera. "He is not just a working dog. He listens like he understands what you meant before you said it." A Marine off-screen chuckled. Daniel whistled 3 notes. The same 3 notes Private Lewis had carried into the room without knowing he was holding a key. Young Halo spun back toward him instantly, paws flying over the grass, joy written through every movement. In the kennel, Ghost answered with a sound so soft it barely lived. A breath. A broken whimper. Not pain. Recognition. Isaiah felt tears rise again, but he held his voice steady. He reached for the photograph and slid it closer to the bars. Daniel's face turned toward the dog. Ghost stared at it. His nose worked hard. Searching paper for a scent time had taken away. Dr. Hart paused the video without being asked. The frozen image held Daniel kneeling with one hand on Halo's shoulder, both of them looking past the camera toward a future neither one knew would be cut short. Isaiah picked up Daniel's tag from the floor. He held it near the photograph. Metal, image, voice, name. For small things. Enough to rebuild a doorway. He looked at Dr. Hart. She nodded once, understanding. Isaiah opened the kennel door. It gave a soft metallic click. Ghost did not flinch. Isaiah did not step inside right away. He waited at the threshold, one knee bent, his hand open with the tag resting in his palm. "Halo," he said softly. The dog's eyes locked onto him. Not Ghost. Not service number. Not the name placed on him by people who had never seen the yard, never heard Daniel laugh, never watched a white dog run toward a voice like it was home. Isaiah swallowed, his own voice lowering until it felt less like speech and more like prayer. "Halo," Danny kept his promise. The stillness after those words was unlike any silence Isaiah had ever known. It was not empty. It was full of pine-scented wind pressing against the window, full of old video light, glowing blue on Dr. Hart's face, full of 7 days of hunger, 7 years of sorrow, and one name returning to the room where it had always belonged. Ghost, Halo, stared at Isaiah. His body was weak, too weak for the joy the memory demanded, but something in him reached before his legs could. He stretched his neck forward, nose trembling, eyes shining with a depth that made Isaiah forget the bars, the chart, the medical wing, all of it. For a moment, there was only a Marine kneeling with another Marine's name in his hand, and a dog deciding whether the world could be trusted again. Isaiah did not move closer. He let Halo choose. The dog pulled one paw forward, then another. Each inch seemed to cost him everything. His chest brushed the blanket. His claws scraped gently on the floor. Dr. Hart turned away briefly, not because she wanted to miss it, but because some mercies were too tender to look at directly. Isaiah held his hand steady. "That is it," he whispered. "Nobody is taking him from you. Not anymore." Halo reached the open doorway and lowered his nose to Daniel's tag. He touched it once, so lightly the metal barely shifted. Then he lifted his eyes to Isaiah's face. There was no wagging tail, no sudden miracle bright enough for a crowd. Just recognition, just permission, just a soul that had been called by its true name and had answered. Isaiah bowed his head. "Welcome back, Halo," he said. And in the quiet, the white dog took one more breath, deeper than the last, as if the name itself had opened a small window inside him and let air return. Halo did not eat right away. The bowl sat 3 feet from the open kennel door, steam no longer rising from it, the chicken and rice cooling beneath the pale lights, and every person in the recovery wing seemed to understand without being told that no one should touch it, no one should slide it closer, no one should turn this holy little moment into a test. Isaiah stayed kneeling at the doorway with Daniel Mercer's dog tag in his open palm, his own breathing slow and measured, the way he had learned to breathe through pain, through fear, through long nights when sleep stood outside the room and refused to come in. Halo's nose rested near the tag. His amber eyes looked heavy, but no longer empty. That was the difference. Exhaustion still held his body. Grief still lay over him like rain-soaked canvas. But somewhere beneath it, life had answered its name. Dr. Hart stood several feet away, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the examination table, afraid that even a clipboard shifting might break the thread stretching between man and dog. The paused video of Daniel Mercer remained on the computer screen behind her, casting a soft blue glow across the room. Daniel was frozen there in mid-smile, one hand on the young white dog's shoulder, forever caught in a day when the grass was green and the future still believed in itself. Isaiah looked at that image, then back at Halo. He understood now that the dog was not being rescued from hunger alone. He was being invited back into a world where love had not been erased. "Take your time," Isaiah whispered. Halo blinked. The words were not a command. They were permission. Slowly, with the careful effort of a creature learning the weight of his own body again, Halo pulled his front paws beneath him. His legs shook so hard Isaiah almost reached out, but he stopped himself. Help offered too soon could feel like being handled. So he waited, his hand steady, his heart anything but. Halo pushed up halfway, then sank down again, breathing through his nose in short, tired bursts. Dr. Hart's eyes filled, but her voice remained professional and soft. "That is good, Halo," she said. The name landed gently in the room. Not like a label, like a homecoming. Halo turned one ear toward her, then looked back at Isaiah. Isaiah slid Daniel's dog tag an inch closer to the bowl, not toward Halo, but toward life. The metal whispered across the floor. Halo followed it with his eyes. Outside, a late truck rolled past the building, tires hissing over damp pavement. Somewhere beyond the windows, a flag rope tapped lightly against a pole in the night wind. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps. Halo lifted his head again. Isaiah knew that sound. Metal, rhythm, memory. The world was full of small bells calling the living forward. Halo moved first with his nose. He touched Daniel's tag once more, then followed the space between the tag and the bowl. The scent of chicken reached him. His nostrils widened. For the first time, he did not turn away from it. Dr. Hart took one silent step closer, then stopped. Isaiah barely breathed. Halo dragged himself another few inches, not graceful, not strong, but determined with the quiet dignity of something sacred. His white fur brushed the floor. His paws slid and caught. His chest trembled. When he reached the bowl, he lowered his muzzle and paused. The room held still. Nothing happened. Then Halo lifted his eyes to Isaiah, and in that look there was a question no animal should have to ask. "If I live, do I leave him behind?" Isaiah felt the question as clearly as if it had been spoken. He lowered his head until his voice could pass through the small space between them like a hand. "No," he whispered. "You carry him with you." Halo's eyes stayed on him. Isaiah touched Caleb Warren's dog tag at his own chest. "That is how we do it." The words broke something open in Isaiah, but not in a way that destroyed him. In a way that let air in. Halo lowered his muzzle again. His tongue touched the food. Once. Barely. A small sound, softer than rain. Dr. Hart pressed her fingers to her lips. Isaiah closed his eyes for half a second, and when he opened them, Halo took another taste. Then another. Not much. Not enough to fill him, but enough to tell the room that he had chosen to remain. Dr. Hart turned away quickly, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand before reaching for her medical chart. Her voice trembled despite her effort. First voluntary intake in 7 days. Isaiah almost laughed at the clinical language, not because it was wrong, but because it was too small for what had happened. A soul had crossed back over. A name had pulled him through. Halo ate slowly, stopping between each mouthful to breathe, to glance at the tag, to look at Isaiah as if checking that the promise was still there. Isaiah did not move. His knees ached. His leg burned. His back protested. He remained. Some vigils were measured not in comfort, but in faithfulness. After several small bites, Halo turned from the bowl and moved, with great effort, toward Isaiah instead of the blanket. He crossed the last foot between them slowly, then lowered his head onto Isaiah's knee. The weight was light. Too light. But it was real. Isaiah's hand hovered above the white fur, waiting. Halo gave the smallest sigh, almost a release, and leaned into him. Only then did Isaiah touch him. His palms settled gently between Halo's ears, warm against the soft coat. No one spoke. The room did not need words. Dr. Hart stood in the glow of the computer screen, watching a Marine with dark skin and tired eyes sit on a cold floor while a white German shepherd rested against him, both of them held together by names that grief had not been able to bury. On the monitor, Daniel Mercer still smiled. On Isaiah's chest, Caleb's tag warmed beneath his shirt. On the floor, Daniel's tag lay beside the bowl, no longer a relic of loss, but a witness to return. Halo took one deeper breath, then another. Isaiah bowed his head over him, not praying out loud, not asking for anything more. This was enough for one night. A dog had eaten, a Marine had stayed, and somewhere in the quiet mercy between them, two old promises began to live again. Weeks passed after Halo had finally taken the first full meal in days. Each morning, Isaiah Brooks arrived at the recovery wing, not with expectation, but with careful observation, carrying the photograph of Daniel Mercer and the two dog tags that now rested gently against his chest beneath his uniform. Halo followed him wherever he went, not with the reckless energy of a young dog, but with the measured, deliberate steps of one who had learned patience through absence. The kennel was no longer a place of waiting, but of quiet training, the low hum of fans mixing with the distant voices of Marines marching across the base. Isaiah observed, taking notes silently, understanding that this dog, once Ghost, now Halo, had rebuilt himself not on food alone, but on recognition, on memory, and on the trust that one name could bring him back from the brink. Each exercise, each simple routine, was punctuated by small acknowledgments, a tilt of the head, a paw lifting, a glance that held more weight than words. Isaiah spoke softly, narrating the steps in a low tone that carried authority without command, a method Daniel Mercer had used long ago. "Heel," he said once, then paused, letting Halo choose the rhythm, not the order. "Sit." A gentle rise of the back paw was all the affirmation Isaiah needed. Outside, the early morning air carried the smell of wet pine and ocean salt, drifting through open windows and brushing against the white fur of Halo as he lay quietly beside Isaiah, both of them taking in the calm of a base waking slowly. Other dogs and Marines moved about the halls, yet the focus remained on these two figures, a man and a dog bonded by absence, grief, and the resurrection of a name. The photograph of Daniel Mercer remained on the table nearby, no longer just an image, but a guide, a whisper of history, of the hand that had shaped Halo's first steps, the voice that had taught him to trust. Isaiah ran a hand down Halo's side, feeling the muscles beneath the white coat tense and relax with every breath, understanding that this was a conversation without sound, a lesson in listening and being present. As the sun rose higher, casting long lines of light across the polished floor, Isaiah spoke of Daniel in soft words, telling Halo of the man who had loved him first, who had taught him to navigate the world with confidence and care. Halo pressed his head closer, ears twitching, eyes tracking every movement, every inflection, learning again how to hear a voice from the past and recognize it in the present. The room remained quiet, the only sound the soft scraping of Halo's paws as he shifted slightly to lean against Isaiah's leg, a gesture of trust, a small affirmation that the bond, once broken, had been mended. The bowl of food sat nearby, untouched at first, then Halo rose slowly, nose twitching, and approached it not with hesitation, but with a quiet acceptance that life could continue, that recognition could lead to sustenance, that names, spoken with care, could open doors long closed. Isaiah allowed the moment to unfold without interference, watching Halo choose, watching trust reestablish itself in slow, deliberate movements. Dr. Hart observed from a distance, understanding the subtle miracle unfolding, the reclamation of identity, the acknowledgement of the past, and the presence of a human who would listen long enough for the dog to return to himself. By mid-morning, Halo had eaten more than before, each bite taken between glances at Isaiah, each glance reinforcing the lessons of patience, of memory, and of loyalty. The ward felt lighter somehow, infused with the quiet grace of recognition restored. Isaiah finally allowed himself to sit back against the wall, exhaling slowly, letting the tension leave his shoulders, feeling the warmth of a living promise resting against him. The day moved on outside the wing, Marines and staff going about their routines, but inside, a white German shepherd had reclaimed his name, A Marine had reclaimed a part of his purpose, and the space between them had been filled with the quietest kind of grace, the kind that requires no words, no ceremony, no audience. Halo rested his head against Isaiah's knee, breathing steadily, eyes half closed, fully alive in a way that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Isaiah lowered his hand over Halo's back, feeling the rise and fall of muscles and breath. And for the first time in what felt like years, he allowed himself to feel the weight of relief, of completion, and of the profound bond that had survived absence, remembered in silence, and restored through the mere act of listening to a name.